Well, here's a question for you to consider. What is the number one threat to a marriage relationship? Well, the answer to that may surprise you, and we are going to get into it. The answer is not porn, it's not affairs, it's something quite different. Now, last podcast, I did an episode called Marriage Hacks, and I assumed it was going to be a one-off, but I started to realize afterwards that there was a number of other ones that I had missed that I think have been of great benefit to me, and I think also can be of benefit to you. So welcome aboard to Marriage Hacks Part 2.
Ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, if you want to connect with me this weekend, this podcast will be coming out on Thursday or Friday. And let me just say the last day of August, August 31st, is we're going to be doing a free online session with me at 6 p.m. Pacific or 9 p.m. Eastern. And if you are on Circle, you will have the link sent to you. If you were on my MailChimp, you will also have the link sent to you. If you want to hop on that call, just send me a quick email at bandofbrothers.care at gmail.com. And we're going to do a hangout time. We're going to talk about some questions around recovery. We're going to look forward to the fall. And just is a chance for you to meet me and also talk about any sort of recovery needs that you have. Once again, that will be Sunday night, August 31st at 6 p.m. Pacific or 9 p.m. Eastern. Well, last week, as we were talking about, we did this whole podcast called Marriage Hacks. It kind of comes out of the fact that me and my wife taught a John Gottman marriage course for a good dozen years or more. We learned and applied all sorts of great skills to our marriage. It's really saved our bacon a number of times. And last week, if I can remember some of those ones off the top of my head, there were things like, did I do anything to hurt you today? We talked about the gratitude exercise. We talked about, what else did we talk about? Well, you'll have to go back and look at the first three. I can't remember off the top of my head. But today I want to give you 5 or 6 more that I think could be of real help to you if you've applied them. And along the way, I will answer that question, what is the number one threat to a marriage relationship? Well, the first hack is one that you might have heard about. In fact, everybody has heard about this unless you were born under a rock. Everyone has heard about love languages, so much so that I know people are now pushing back and going, well, there's not really any scientific basis to that. Many of the things of soft science or the social sciences, you would be hard pressed to do a double-blind study on any of these. But the reality is simply this: no two people are alike. And all of us perceive love in different ways. And it's a mistake for us to assume that our marriage partner wants to be loved in the same way that we want to be loved. And of course, if you know, the 5 main love languages are words of affirmation. Those are verbal compliments or encouraging words, which is my wife's number one love language. Quality time, that is togetherness, focused attention. Excuse me, we'll come back to that. Receiving gifts. That's probably the easiest to learn and perhaps the most expensive. Acts of service could be an example where you do things around the house, or, find ways of practically loving your partner, those kind of things. And the last one is physical touch. And it's not just sex, it's the whole gamut of physical affection, from reaching out, touching, holding hands, hugging, back rubs, back scratches, you name it. And again, I'm not committed, the fact that it has to be those five. You might have a different love language, but here's the point. You had better become a student of your spouse. And if you are trying to love your spouse in one way and they would prefer to be loved in another way, then you're just banging your head against the wall. You bring flowers home and, you're going, well, there's a gift. You should really, be really excited about this. And your wife is still cold to you because you failed to do the two things that you said you were going to do yesterday. You were going to, empty the dishwasher and vacuum, the living room, and you didn't do that. She's still mad at you about yesterday because you didn't do your, the idea of acts of service. And so the fact that you brought flowers home might actually not work in your favor. She might actually think you're simply trying to manipulate her. Right, which would be, a wasted set of flowers. So whether or not you're into those five love languages, the point is this: you need to love your partner in the way they want to be loved. And you had better figure that out pretty darn early, instead of, well, this is what works for me. Why doesn't it work for you? Because you didn't marry yourself. You married her, right? So that is a one that probably all of you have heard about, but I still think is a good question and is a good hack to figure out along the lines of that. So number one hack is simply knowing your partner's love language. And they're not all the same. Neither me or my wife really care a lot about gifts. So, I mean, you can buy me a gift, that's fine. But gifts, in fact, okay, this is really bad, but my wife will often say, I'm going to go out and buy my own gift. Is that okay with you? And I'll say, sure, love that. Now, again, my wife takes a lot of pressure off me that way, but gifts are not really her thing. But if gifts were her thing, and I say, why don't you go out and buy your own gift? She would be horrified. She would be mad because she's expecting the time, care, and attention that I put into buying her a gift is a direct reflection of my love for her. You see the difference here? You got to know your partner. So number one, the age-old, often, talked about love languages, I still think is a good start to the first marriage hack. Okay, marriage hack number two, and I want to start on these next two hacks by answering the question, what is the number one threat to your relationship? And there's lots of things that could up, but let me put it this way. The number one threat is this: it is leading parallel lives. As you get married and let's say kids come along and work pressures come along, you just find yourself getting busier and busier. You're trying to raise kids. You're trying to, pay off the mortgage at the end of the month. You're doing all of these things. Maybe you have some separate interests. And before you know it, your piles of separateness, they are bigger and larger and higher than your pile of togetherness. Leading parallel lives is the number one threat to a relationship. I work with guys all different ages. When I work with guys whose, for example, their kids are in high school, this becomes something I really spend a lot of time with the guys on. Because what I say is this: you realize that in 1, 2, 3 years from now, your kids are going to be leaving home. And you are going to be left with your partner. How much connection have you built? Have you simply become strangers living in the same house? And you had better start to reverse that now than when your oldest or when your first child leaves home. I heard a stat recently, which was kind of sad, that one of the times of biggest crisis in a marriage, and when a lot of divorces happen, a lot of separations happen, is when the first child leaves home. Well, why is that? It's because of this whole parallel lives thing that has been in place. So I want to give you a couple tools here, a couple hacks to really reverse that. The first one is called the Magic 5. And this one's actually been done in studies, and they interviewed couples and they asked them, do you feel close and connected with your partner? Yes or no? And then they asked them to literally sit down and figure out how much time they and their partner had spent that week together in any sort of conversation, going out on a date, some sort of connection activity. And they did a comparison of those two. And they found out if you spend just 2 hours a week, your partner or you are going to feel distant and disconnected. You spend 3 hours a week, distant and disconnected. 4 hours a week, distant and disconnected. 5 hours a week, ding, 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 ding. All of a sudden, the partners, they described their relationship as close and connected. 5 hours a week was the tipping point. Now, I had one guy in my marriage course, he wasn't very maritally sensitive. He put up his hand and said, so you mean 6 hours a week is 1 hour of wasted time? Needless to say, he could have used a black eye there, an elbow from his wife. But that is absolutely crucial. And so you go, 5 hours a week, do you know my life? Well, think about it. Just quick conversations you can have before you go. What's your day going to be like? What can I be thinking about? What can I be praying for? Coming back, taking another 15, 20 minutes. How was your day? How did it go? You mentioned these things first thing in the morning. How did this go? How did that go? It could mean going out for a date night. It could be something like that. It's little ways that you intentionally start putting time aside if you're really care about keeping close and connected. Absolutely crucial. So the Magic 5 is hack number 2. Now the next one is one that it became a bit of a joke in our groups and our classes, because I would continually harp about this. My wife would continually harp about this. And this was the idea of going on an overnight getaway with your spouse. And I told everybody this: if you want to stay married, this is what you need to do. At the very minimum, you need to get away 3 or 4 times a year overnight, just the two of you. And I would have people push back. Are you kidding? That's way. Are you like, I have young kids. I have this. I have that. We have jobs. We have that. And I said, listen, when we had young kids, this is the way we did it. And our kids were crazy. They were rambunctious. I don't know how many babysitters we went through. We would get supper ready and the babysitter would show up. We would always pick a new babysitter and pay him lots of money. And what would happen is we would have supper ready. Me and my wife would take off. We would drive to the next town, 30, 40 minutes. It wouldn't be far. And we would spend overnight. We would grab a hotel and do all the things that implies as part of that. We would we'd go out for supper that night. Let's not forget that. We'd get up that morning, have breakfast. Maybe we would go shopping. Maybe we would go to a movie. And then we would come back the next day just before supper. And by that time, the kids were hanging off the chandeliers. The babysitter had pulled all her hair out. And, and we bribed, her not to say anything to the next babysitter. I'm overstating it in a way, but it didn't cost us much. I don't know, a couple $100. So put, that kind of thing. So put $50 a month aside, and in 3 or 4 months, you have a couple $100. We would get a fairly cheap hotel. We would get one that had breakfast. And we did that 3 or 4 times a year, like every 3 months or every 4 months. And we did that for every year of our relationship. We still do that. That's hack number 3. And both the Magic 5 and this hack are directly going after that idea that you are going to develop parallel lives. You go, not on our watch, we're not developing parallel lives. And if you do realize your life has got busy and you've started to lose that sense of connection, what you do is you go back and say, okay, you have a come to Jesus conversation and you go, we're going to go and we're going to invest in some of these examples. Again, I'm hoping that some of you men are willing to share this with your wife. Okay, hack number 4. I guess we're up to 4 now. It all has to do with the idea of putting out fires or minimizing escalation. And escalation is simply that idea of a little conversation turns into a full blow up. You have a small flame, and for some reason, one of you brings a can of gasoline on and pours it on the flame rather than a fire extinguisher or water. And you all know those sorts of issues that have the tendency to go sideways. So a couple tools that have become really helpful here is the idea of two tools. Number 1 is learning to do a soft startup. You can do a soft startup in a conversation, or you can do a harsh startup. And here's the idea. If you start a conversation softly, it's going to probably end softly. If you start a conversation harshly, it's going to end harshly. In other words, conversations end in the way that you started them. So you learn to do what's called a soft startup. So here's just a couple from one of the worksheets we did. Here's a harsh startup. I can't stand it when your mother comes over. That's a harsh startup. Guess where that conversation's going to go? Versus, you know what? I'm worried that your mom is going to try to micromanage us again tonight. I would love it if you would back me up. Right? Here's a harsh startup. You never take me anywhere. I'm sick of doing all the cooking. That's a harsh startup. Here's a soft startup. I'm tired of cooking. It'd be real nice if you took me out. Okay. Here's a harsh startup. You're so cold to me. We never have sex anymore. That's a pretty harsh startup. See, all the harsh startups, what they're going to do is they're going to create a defensive reaction. And they're going to probably throw something back. And before you know it, you've got gasoline pouring itself on the fire. Right? Here's a soft startup of that last one. I really am missing you lately. You know how much you turn me on. I'd love to make love with you. When would be a good time? That's a soft startup. Right? Harsh startups, soft startups. The next tool that goes with it, I think we're up to 5 right now, is the idea of a repair attempt. And a repair attempt is simply the idea that despite your best efforts, sometimes you start feeling that it's like you're on a black diamond ski hill. This conversation is starting to feel like a runaway conversation. It's starting to escalate. Our emotions are starting to get super engaged and our voices are getting louder, and it just feels like there's escalation happening. And repair attempts are things that you learn, and I can send you this worksheet if you're interested. Again, bandofbrothers.care @gmail.com, where you simply learn some really good repair attempt phrases like, I feel defensive. I'd love it if you would rephrase that. Or, my reactions were too extreme. Can I try again? I can see my part in all of this. Yeah, I agree with part of what you're saying. I'm struggling with parts, but parts of what you're saying are really helpful for me. Or, this problem is not a huge problem in terms of our lives, but it's something that is really good for us to talk about. Things like, what, I'm feeling flooded right now. I do need to calm down. Can I take a quick break and come back to this a little later tonight? Those kind of ideas. Sometimes it's okay to disengage from the conversation. It's called being flooded, as long as there's a time in. You could say things like, what, I'm recognizing I have a part to play in this problem. Or, what, that's a good point. I'm actually really thankful for this or that. Or the last one, which harkens back. Oh, there's another one last week. Same team, same jersey. Here it goes back to this. You know what? This is not your problem. This is our problem. A repair attempt. So those are some of the examples of hack number 5. Okay. The last hack I want to talk about is one that sometimes really, I don't know, it's not always seen as a positive thing, but here is what we're talking about. There in your relationship is going to be types of problems which are solvable, and there's going to be other problems which are perpetual. This is the last hack you need to remember. Solvable problems are ones, where are we going to spend this summer? What are we going to do with our holidays? Or we got $2,000 from your mother how are we going to spend that? Or our child is having a problem with a classmate or with a teacher. How are we going to deal with that? Those are solvable. They're specific, they're situational, and they are external to some degree. But here is the sad news. The sad news is this: 70% of the problems you're going to face are actually perpetual because they have to do with the way your partner is wired. A book called After the Honeymoon says this: when choosing a lifelong partner, you will inevitably be choosing a set of unsolvable problems that you will be grappling with for the next 10, 20, or 50 years. You're going, oh my goodness. And so the point is this: you married a person who is different than you. Big surprise. And you are going to realize, you know what? We are very different people in all sorts of personal ways. I'm just going to read you a few. And again, I have a great worksheet on this one. You're going to be different maybe in your versions of neatness and organization. One of you is neat and organized. The next is more casual, so to speak. Different levels of emotionality. One of you is very expressive emotionally. The other is more not so expressive. You're going to have differences in the amount of time that you want to spend together and the amount of time you want to spend alone. You're going to be different in your approach to finances. One of you is probably a little more liberal and generous. The other is a little more financially conservative. You may have differences in the amount of relationship you want with your in-laws. You're going, please, for the love of whatever, would you stop? But no, I've got a list of 25 of them. And that's just, there's a difference in preferred activity level. One of you loves to be involved physically, outdoors. The other one might be more passive and sedentary. One of you is more ambitious and values work. The other one doesn't value work and success in the same way. One of you maybe loves excitement and experiences. The other is not nearly as adventuresome. Do you see the difference? And let me ask you, how well is your marriage going to go if you do your damnedest and your hardest to change your partner to be just like you? Well, the answer is it's not going to go very well. And so when you are dealing and you recognize we are dealing with a perpetual problem, the first thing that you apply is acceptance. I accept you the way you are. I am not trying to change you. I am not saying I'm better than you or you're inferior to me. I accept you in your differences. Now, with that said, how can we work together? How can we compromise? So let's say I like having people over all the time and you don't want to have people over at all. Okay, once a month, can we maybe do a football party? And we prepare and I help you clean the house. And I know that that's just not what you'd prefer. That's just an example of that. But the basis has to be acceptance. It can't be you trying to change your partner to be just like you. I've got a great worksheet on that in terms of different types of perpetual differences. All right. You say, I thought this was a recovery course. Well, it is that, but how much of our relationship is related at times to this as well? So there we go. We're 25 minutes in. I've given you 5 or 6 more marriage hacks. I have 1 or 2 more. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a part 3. But hopefully that gives you something to talk about, challenge you to share that with your wife, or your husband if you're a woman listening to this. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to also see you Sunday night, August 31st. If you want to join our Zoom group, love to connect with different people who find this podcast helpful. We'll see you next time.